The golden evening sun dipped low over Manhattan, casting a soft glow on the windows of the towering building that housed the headquarters of Blackwood International. Inside, the office on the top floor was a quiet sanctuary of luxury, polished walnut furniture, leather chairs, and the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Julian Blackwood stood with his back to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his navy blue suit perfectly tailored, his silver watch gleaming on his wrist. At 39, Julian was a self-made millionaire, CEO of one of the most powerful logistics firms in the United States. Known for his ruthless negotiation tactics and icy demeanor, he had a reputation that preceded him. But tonight, something different weighed on his usually calm mind. He stared at the invitation lying on his mahogany desk, the gold-embossed lettering catching the last sliver of sunlight. It was for the Hearts for Hope annual charity gala at the Waldorf Astoria, a gathering of the elite, wealthy donors, celebrities and socialites, all dressed in designer gowns and tuxedos, sipping champagne for a cause that half of them hardly cared about. Julian usually sent a donation and skipped such events. He hated small talk and fake smiles. But this time his close friend and board member Dennis Harlow had insisted he attend. "It's not just for the press," Dennis had said. "It's good for your image. Shows the public you're not just a businessman but a human being with a heart." Julian had chuckled at the thought. A heart? That had been buried years ago. He hadn't been to a gala, or any public event of this nature, since the divorce. It had been 5 years now, but the wound still felt fresh on some days. He hadn't spoken to her since she left. No calls. No emails. Not even a rumor. As if she had disappeared off the face of the earth. But that was the way Julian preferred it. He was married to his work now, and his company had never been more profitable. The limo arrived at exactly 6:45 p.m. Julian stepped in without a word, nodding briefly to his driver Theo, who'd been with him for nearly a decade. As the car rolled smoothly through the streets of New York, Julian adjusted his cufflinks, his mind already running through the list of people he would likely encounter tonight. Potential investors, old acquaintances, a few journalists, and the usual swarm of PR handlers. The Waldorf Astoria was buzzing with life when he arrived. Flashing cameras lit the entrance as guests poured in, dressed in elegance and glitter. Julian walked the carpet with ease, answering a few questions from the press, giving them just enough to chew on but not enough to pry open his guarded world. Inside, the ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and laughter. A live jazz band played in the background while waiters moved silently among the guests, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Julian made his way through the crowd, exchanging brief pleasantries, nodding at familiar faces. Everyone noticed him, of course. He was hard to miss. Tall, sharp-featured, and always dressed like he belonged on the cover of Forbes. But behind his perfectly measured expressions, Julian was counting the minutes. He planned to stay just long enough to make an appearance, donate a handsome check and slip out before dessert. He was halfway through a conversation with the mayor's assistant when something strange happened. The atmosphere around the entrance seemed to shift. Conversations dulled for a second. Heads turned, whispers stirred. Julian followed the line of sight of several guests, and that's when he saw her. Time didn't stop, but it certainly slowed. She stood under the grand arch of the ballroom entrance, in a deep emerald gown that clung to her in all the right places. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, styled elegantly around her neck, and her face, God, that face, was exactly the same. Olivia. His ex-wife. But she wasn't alone. Holding each of her hands were 2 little boys, no more than 4 years old. And just a step behind her, a third child, a little girl, clung to the edge of her dress. All 3 children had the same thick brown hair, the same sharp jawline and eyes that mirrored Julian so perfectly it made his breath catch in his throat. He blinked, thinking it had to be a coincidence. Maybe they just looked similar. Maybe it was a trick of the light. But his gut knew the truth before his mind caught up. Olivia hadn't seen him yet. She was speaking softly to the kids, gently fixing the collar of one of the boys and whispering something that made the little girl giggle. Julian stood frozen, every calculated thought evaporating into thin air. Around him, the noise of the gala seemed to fade into a soft hum, like background static to a dream. 5 years. 5 years without a word, and she walks in like this, at the one event he randomly decided to attend. His hand curled slightly around his glass. Anger, confusion, a strange mix of guilt and awe swirled in his chest. He didn't know whether to storm out or walk up to her and demand answers in front of the entire room. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Julian didn't move for a full minute, caught in the surreal weight of the moment. Olivia. And 3 children who looked like miniature versions of himself. The gala continued as though nothing earth-shattering had happened, but to Julian, everything had shifted. His fingers tightened around his whiskey glass, now sweating from the ice, while his eyes remained fixed on her. She moved through the room with calm confidence, smiling politely at people who greeted her, unaware that her reappearance had set his world on fire. Julian watched the kids cling to her, 2 boys and a girl, each of them full of energy and life, eyes wide with the excitement of the glamorous event. No nanny, no assistant. Just her, effortlessly managing 3 children as though she'd done it 1,000 times. He hadn't seen her in 5 years. Not since the night she packed her bags, left a note on the marble kitchen counter, and disappeared without another word. He remembered that night vividly. They had fought, of course. Their last months together were a cycle of distance and disappointment. He was too absorbed in work, too driven by ambition to notice her slipping away. But he never imagined she'd leave. And he certainly never imagined she'd leave pregnant. Now, standing across the room, he watched as she crouched down, fixing the bow on one of the boys' tiny dress shoes, her face gentle and full of warmth. He felt a strange ache in his chest, regret laced with disbelief. How could she have hidden them from him? Why would she make such a decision? And why now, after all this time, had she walked back into his orbit like a ghost come to life? As if sensing his stare, Olivia finally looked up. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the noise and sparkle of the gala melted into silence. Her smile faltered. A brief flash of hesitation passed over her face, followed by a steadying breath. Then she straightened and walked away from the crowd, guiding the children toward the far side of the ballroom, pretending not to see him. But Julian wasn't about to let her vanish again. He placed his glass on a nearby table and moved with quiet determination across the room, ignoring everyone who tried to stop him for small talk. Each step closer brought a dozen more questions to the surface. When he finally reached her, she was standing near the floral centerpiece by the staircase, adjusting her daughter's headband. "Olivia," he said, his voice sharp with disbelief and something deeper he couldn't name. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze with an unreadable expression. "Julian," she replied, cool and composed as if they hadn't just been dropped into a plot twist worthy of a soap opera. "We need to talk," he said, struggling to keep his tone even. "Yes," she agreed. "But not here. Not in front of them." She glanced down at the children, who had now noticed him and were staring up at him curiously, as if something about his presence felt oddly familiar. Julian crouched slightly to their level. "Hey," he said, unsure what to do or say. "Hi," one of the boys answered shyly, clutching Olivia's dress. The little girl blinked at him with eyes identical to his own, then grinned. "Are you a prince?" she asked. Julian gave a dry laugh, caught off guard by the question. "Something like that," he murmured. Olivia touched the girl's shoulder gently. "Why don't you 3 go sit with Miss Carla over there?" she said, pointing to a familiar face, an older woman Julian recognized as Olivia's former assistant. The kids nodded and skipped away giggling. Julian turned to her, emotion simmering just beneath the surface. "They're mine." It wasn't a question. Olivia didn't flinch. "Yes." The simple confirmation sent a chill down his spine. "Why the hell didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice low but intense. She didn't shrink from his anger. "Because you wouldn't have made time. Back then your company came before everything. Before me. Before the idea of a family." Julian stepped back slightly, the accusation hitting harder than he expected. "You don't get to decide that for me. You don't get to vanish with 3 children and pretend it was to protect me from myself." Her expression softened, just for a moment. "I didn't do it to punish you, Julian. I did it because I didn't want them to grow up wondering why their father was always too busy. I couldn't raise them in a home where love came second to business deals." The silence between them hung heavy, full of things that should have been said years ago. Julian's thoughts raced, memories of missed dinners, ignored messages, a marriage that had withered under the weight of success. Still, none of it justified this. "You don't get to rewrite our story," he said bitterly. "I deserve to know. They deserve to know." Olivia nodded slowly. "You're right. I made that decision alone. And I'll carry the consequences. But I won't apologize for raising them with love and stability." He stared at her, jaw clenched, heart pounding in his chest. 3 children. 3 versions of himself walking around a world he hadn't even known existed. "What now?" he asked, voice low. "You just show up at a charity gala with them like it's no big deal?" She exhaled. "I didn't know you would be here. I came because I was invited by a friend who runs the event. I wasn't expecting this." Julian rubbed his temples, suddenly feeling the weight of everything settle into his bones. We're going to talk, he said. Tomorrow. Privately. No running. No hiding. Olivia nodded once. I'll meet you at the Park Avenue Cafe. Noon. And just like that, she turned and walked back to her children, leaving Julian standing in the middle of the glittering ballroom, his entire life thrown off its axis. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Julian arrived at the Park Avenue Cafe 15 minutes early, a rare act for someone known for cutting every meeting close. He sat by the window, nursing a lukewarm black coffee, his eyes flicking between the clock on the wall and the door. Outside, New York bustled as usual, yellow cabs, hurried pedestrians, and the low hum of city life. But inside him, a storm brewed. Every minute that passed seemed to stretch time thinner, bringing with it more questions and emotions he wasn't used to processing. Last night hadn't been a dream. Olivia was back, and with her, the unimaginable reality of 3 children who looked unmistakably like him. He kept playing scenes over in his mind. The way she had walked in, calm and composed, the look in her eyes when she saw him, the familiar tilt of her chin when she said his name. There had been no panic, no desperate apology, just controlled grace. He hated how much it still affected him. Their relationship had ended bitterly, but the truth was he never really stopped thinking about her. And now, with the weight of fatherhood crashing down in one sweeping blow, he felt like a man who had slept through 5 years of his own life. At exactly noon, the door opened and she stepped in, wearing a dark green coat, her hair pulled into a neat bun. She looked tired in a way only a single mother of 3 could, but there was still a quiet strength about her. She spotted him instantly and made her way over. Julian stood up, uncertain whether to greet her with a handshake or something more personal. He ended up just nodding, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thanks for coming, he said. Didn't have much of a choice, did I? She replied, managing a half smile. They sat in silence for a few seconds, the kind that presses against your ribs and makes it hard to breathe. A waiter approached and she ordered tea without asking for the menu. Then finally Julian leaned in, voice quiet but firm. Start from the beginning. All of it. Olivia folded her hands on the table, staring down at her fingers as if the story was hiding in the creases of her skin. I found out I was pregnant about a month after I left. At first I thought it was just the stress, period fatigue. But then I took a test and everything changed. Julian's breath caught in his throat. He could already guess the timeline. You didn't think to tell me? He asked. I did, she said quickly. More times than you know. I even picked up the phone once, dialed your number. But then I saw the headlines, another acquisition, another billion-dollar deal. You were everywhere, Julian. Smiling in suits, shaking hands, building your empire. And I didn't think there was room in your world for a family. Not then. Julian clenched his fists beneath the table. You should have let me decide that. Olivia looked up, her eyes soft but steady. Maybe. But at the time, I didn't trust you to choose anything over your ambition. And I wasn't willing to gamble their lives on a maybe. The tea arrived, steam curling up between them. Julian stared at the little swirl for a while, then asked, So how did you do it? Raise them all alone? A trace of pride crossed her face. I moved to Asheville. It's quiet, affordable, and full of kind people. I worked freelance marketing jobs, took gigs that let me stay home. My mom helped in the beginning before her health declined. The boys, Elliot and Ryan, are as different as night and day. And Ivy? She's the boss. 5 years of scraped knees, bedtime stories, and macaroni art. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every second. Julian felt like someone had pressed pause on his entire life and rewound it without his permission. I've missed everything, he muttered. Olivia didn't say anything. Her silence wasn't cruel, it was just the kind that allowed truth to settle in. They need to know me, he said after a while, more to himself than to her. And I need to know them. I want to be their father. She nodded. I expected you would say that. And I won't stop you. But it has to happen slowly. You're a stranger to them, Julian. You can't just walk in and expect them to understand. Her words stung, but he knew they were true. He thought of all the moments he'd missed. Their first words, first steps, birthdays, late-night fevers. There would be no catching up on those years, only trying to build something new. Can I see them? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia hesitated, then pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo album. She turned the screen toward him. There they were, Elliot with a pirate eye patch and plastic sword, Ryan grinning with missing front teeth, Ivy holding a glitter-covered drawing that said, I love you, Mommy, in bold, crooked letters. Julian felt something shift in his chest. These weren't just kids who looked like him, they were his kids. Olivia watched him quietly, then finally said, "They're at Central Park with Carla today. We're staying in the city until Sunday. If you want to come by the playground around 3, I won't stop you." Julian nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. They sat in silence a bit longer, two people bound by a past neither could escape and a future neither had prepared for. But somewhere in that stillness, something resembling hope began to take shape. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Julian spent the hours between the cafe meeting and 3 o'clock pacing around his penthouse in Tribeca like a man waiting for a verdict. The sleek interior, polished hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, suddenly felt cold and hollow. He'd built this life with meticulous precision, layering success upon success until he had everything money could buy. And yet, in a matter of moments, that life felt incomplete. 3 small strangers, his own children, were somewhere in the city playing in a park, entirely unaware of the tidal wave about to hit their world. He wasn't sure what to expect at the playground. Should he bring gifts? Candy? Balloons? Would they run up to him or shy away behind their nanny's legs? And what if they asked questions? Questions he couldn't answer, not without unraveling everything they believed about their world. At 10 to 3 he left the apartment, dressed not in his usual tailored suit but in jeans and a sweater, trying to look less like a billionaire CEO and more like someone approachable. Central Park buzzed with life as always. Children chased each other across the grass, parents sipped coffee on benches, and joggers wove between strollers and scooters. It was the kind of afternoon that felt suspended in time, sunlight filtering through tree branches, a gentle breeze stirring the air. Julian spotted the playground easily. It was fenced, colorful, and crawling with laughter. He saw them almost immediately, 2 boys and a girl near the climbing wall, their energy contagious. One of the boys had scraped his knee but was proudly showing it off like a badge of honor. The girl, tiny, determined, was bossing the boys around with the authority of a general. And even from 20 feet away, Julian could see it. The resemblance. It was like looking into a time machine that had split him into 3. Carla, the nanny, sat on a bench nearby reading a magazine. Olivia wasn't in sight. Julian took a breath and approached. Carla looked up, startled at first, then gave a polite, tight-lipped nod. "They don't know," she whispered as he neared. "About who you are." "I understand," he said. "I just want to watch for a minute." And so he stood, hands in his pockets, watching from the edge. It was surreal. Ryan had his intensity, Elliot his sarcasm. Ivy, she had his eyes. The longer he watched, the more familiar they became, as if his blood had somehow shaped their gestures and laughter. After a few minutes, Carla leaned in and said, "You should say hello. It'll be better coming from you than a stranger later." Julian nodded, then stepped forward slowly, his heart pounding like he was walking into a boardroom unprepared. Ivy was the first to notice. She looked at him, head tilted. "Do we know you?" she asked, not rudely, just with a child's blunt curiosity. "Not yet," Julian replied, crouching to her level. "But I'd like to." The boys came closer, cautious. "I'm Julian," he said. I used to know your mom. A long time ago." Ryan frowned. "Like a boyfriend?" Julian smiled, trying not to show how nervous he was. "Kind of. More like a really good friend. From before you were born." "You talk like a cartoon," Elliot said. "Are you from TV?" Julian chuckled. "No, but I wish. That would have made this easier." They were skeptical but not hostile. Children are resilient, open to new possibilities if you speak their language. He asked about their favorite games, their school, their pets. Ivy launched into a detailed description of her imaginary dog, Sparkle, while Elliot claimed he could eat 3 burgers in one sitting. Ryan hung back, quieter, watching Julian with narrowed eyes like he was working out a puzzle. They played for another hour and slowly a kind of rhythm emerged. Julian pushed them on the swings, helped Ivy tie her shoelaces, and listened to Ryan describe a dream he had about flying a spaceship over the Hudson River. It was clumsy and strange and wonderful. At one point Elliot asked, "So, do you have kids?" Julian hesitated. "I think I do," he said softly. "I think they might be right in front of me." The words hung in the air for a moment before Ivy giggled. "That's silly. You don't even live with us." "I know," Julian replied. "But I'd like to be part of your lives. If it's okay with you." Ryan finally spoke very quietly. "Do you love our mom?" The question hit harder than Julian expected. "I used to," he answered honestly. "And maybe I still do. She's amazing." The boy nodded, accepting that without a follow-up. Children sometimes understood emotions better than adults. As the sun began to dip, Carla signaled that it was time to go. Julian stood up, brushing sand from his jeans. Ivy ran up and hugged his leg without warning. "You're nice," she said. "You smell like cookies." Julian laughed, blinking away the sudden sting in his eyes. "I'll take that as a compliment." The boys waved, still uncertain but no longer wary. As they walked away, Ivy turned back and shouted, "Bye, new maybe dad." Carla looked horrified, but Julian only smiled. Maybe dad. It wasn't a title he ever expected to hear, but it might just be the most important one he'd ever earn. He stayed in the park long after they were gone, sitting on a bench, the noise of the city fading into background blur. The playground, now half empty, seemed to echo with the sound of their laughter. His life had just split into two, before and after that moment. And he knew, with startling clarity, that whatever came next, he wasn't going back to the old version of himself. The empire could wait. The boardrooms, the deals, the acclaim, they were hollow without meaning. And for the first time in years he felt something close to purpose. His world had changed in a single afternoon. And he was ready to fight for it. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The next morning, Julian woke up before sunrise, something he hadn't done willingly since his early startup days. But today wasn't about chasing numbers or quarterly profits. It was about figuring out how to navigate this uncharted terrain of parenthood and fractured love. He sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, staring at the city lights fading into daylight, his mind replaying every moment from the park. Ivy's unexpected hug, Ryan's question, Elliot's sarcastic curiosity, it all felt surreal. He wanted to see them again, not just once or twice but regularly. He wanted to be part of their lives, learn their quirks, know which cartoons they liked, what made them laugh, what scared them. But he also knew it wouldn't be that easy. There was Olivia. She hadn't returned any of his texts since the gala. No calls. No explanations. Julian wasn't even sure what her silence meant. Was it anger, fear, or just confusion? He couldn't blame her. They had ended badly. Not explosively, but with the kind of cold finality that comes from growing apart, both too stubborn to fix what was breaking. And now, 6 years later, the aftermath was walking around on tiny legs and calling another man dad. That thought stung more than he wanted to admit. By mid-morning he made a decision. He wouldn't ambush her. He wouldn't use lawyers or drama. He'd go to her home. Not uninvited, not unannounced, he'd stand outside and wait if he had to. He just needed to talk. A conversation was the least they owed each other. He grabbed his coat and took a cab to Brooklyn Heights, where Olivia now lived. He'd done his research, more out of curiosity than obsession, when he first saw her at the gala. She'd bought a brownstone 2 years ago, modest by New York standards but warm, with ivy creeping up the brick and a red door that stood out against the neighborhood's monotone hues. When the cab pulled up, he felt a wave of nerves unlike anything he'd experienced in business meetings or shareholder brawls. This was personal. This was Olivia. She opened the door before he even knocked, clearly having spotted him through the window. She looked tired. Not worn down, just like someone who'd been carrying too much for too long. Her eyes scanned him quickly, and for a moment they just stood there, a foot of space between them and 1,000 unspoken things in the air. "You don't give up, do you?" she said quietly. "Not when it matters," Julian replied, voice low. She sighed and stepped aside. 10 minutes. That's all I can give you." The house smelled like cinnamon and something floral. The living room was neat but lived in, children's drawings taped to the walls, a small mountain of books on the coffee table, a forgotten toy train near the couch. Julian took it all in silently, his heart swelling and breaking at the same time. Olivia sat on an armchair, legs crossed, expression unreadable. He remained standing. "I'm not here to cause problems," he began. "I'm not trying to disrupt what you've built or confuse the kids. I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me?" Olivia looked away for a moment, her fingers tightening on the armrest. "Because I didn't think you wanted this. We were done. You had your empire, your plans. And I was scared. Scared of becoming someone else's footnote." Julian swallowed hard. "They're not footnotes. They're everything. And I missed it all." "They don't know you," she said, her voice softer now. "They have a life. A good one. Jason's been their father since they were 2. The name hit Julian like a gut punch. "So, he knows." Olivia nodded. "I told him everything when we started getting serious. He didn't flinch. He stayed. He's a good man." Julian sat down, suddenly feeling the weight of it all. "Then where does that leave me?" "That's the part one don't know," Olivia admitted. I don't want to tear apart something that works. But I also saw their faces after the park. They lit up when they talked about you. Even Ryan, and you know how hard he is to impress. Julian smiled faintly at that. He asked me if I loved you. Olivia raised an eyebrow. What did you say? I said I used to. And maybe I still do. That hung between them for a while. Not accusation, not nostalgia, just honesty. She didn't answer immediately and he didn't push. Instead he shifted gears. Can I see them again? With boundaries. Your rules. I want to know them. And if they want to know me, I'll be here. Every step. No disappearances. No half measures. Olivia leaned back, processing. You really mean that? I do, he said with more conviction than he had spoken in months. I didn't know what I was missing until I saw them. And now that I do, I can't unsee it. She nodded slowly, still unsure but clearly moved. Okay. 1 day a week for now. Sundays. We'll meet at the park or the museum. Somewhere public. No surprises. Deal, Julian said quickly, his heart lifting. And Julian, she added just as he stood, this isn't a contest. Jason's not the enemy. Don't try to win them like it's some startup pitch. I'm not here to win, Julian said gently. I'm here to earn. As he stepped out into the street again, the chill in the air didn't bother him. For the first time in a long time, something inside him had thawed. Sundays were a start. And for a man who built billion-dollar empires in months, building trust with 3 kids in Brooklyn felt like the most ambitious project of his life. But he was ready. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Sunday came with the kind of nervous energy Julian hadn't felt since his first investor pitch in Manhattan over a decade ago. He stood by the gates of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, holding 3 small paper bags in one hand, each carefully labeled with a name, Ryan, Ivy, and Elliot. He had spent hours selecting what to put inside them. For Ivy, a paint set with mini canvases. For Ryan, a dinosaur puzzle with glow-in-the-dark bones. And for Elliot, a build-your-own comic book kit. Gifts weren't supposed to replace presents, he knew that, but they could be a warm introduction, a way to say, I've been thinking about you. He kept checking his watch even though he was 15 minutes early. When Olivia finally arrived with the kids, his nerves doubled. The 3 of them looked different in daylight. No velvet tuxedos or gala stage lights, just jeans, sneakers, and light jackets. Ryan led the pack, Ivy skipped along the edge of the path, and Elliot trailed behind Olivia, his hand wrapped around 2 of her fingers. When they spotted Julian, their reactions were telling. Ryan slowed down and gave a cautious wave. Ivy's face lit up and she ran toward him with zero hesitation. Elliot stood still, squinting, thinking. Julian knelt as Ivy hugged him again, tighter than the first time. You remembered, she squealed. You said we'd see you again. He handed her the bag, grinning. This is for you, Miss Ivy. I hope you like painting. She peered into the bag, eyes wide, and turned to show her brothers. Ryan took his with curiosity, and Elliot finally stepped forward, slowly taking the 3rd bag without a word. Julian looked up at Olivia for a second. She gave a small nod, a signal of trust. You hungry? Julian asked the kids. I thought we'd do a picnic. They all nodded, and together they walked into the garden, Julian pushing the basket Olivia had packed, the kids buzzing with questions. They sat under a giant oak, its branches just beginning to sprout spring green. Julian laid out sandwiches, fruit, cookies, and tiny juice boxes. Ivy and Elliot dove into the food, while Ryan studied Julian with the seriousness of a detective. Do you know how to ride a bike? He asked. I do, Julian replied. Why? Because Mom says if you can't ride a bike you can't be cool. Olivia raised her eyebrows at that, laughing under her breath. I said no such thing, Ryan. Ryan smirked and looked back at Julian. Want to race sometime? Julian grinned. You're on. They spent the next 2 hours exploring the garden's different sections. The Japanese hill and pond garden, the cherry esplanade, the rock garden. Ivy ran ahead, calling out every flower she recognized, while Elliot clung to Julian's hand for a full 15 minutes, silently, until he finally said, My school has a bunny. His name is Pepper. Julian looked down, surprised but delighted. That's a great name for a bunny. Elliot nodded, serious. He likes bananas. Julian stored that fact like treasure. He wanted to remember everything. Later, while the kids were playing near the water feature, Julian sat on the bench beside Olivia. She looked more relaxed than she had the last time they met, but still guarded. They're opening up faster than I thought, she said quietly. They like you. It's scary how fast this could all change. Julian rested his arms on his knees, watching Ivy help Elliot hop over a rock. I'm not going to mess it up. Whatever pace you need, I'm okay with it. Just, don't shut me out. Olivia looked at him. I don't want to. But I've built this world for them brick by brick. You can't just walk in and start rearranging the furniture. I'm not trying to, he said, turning to face her. I just want to be someone they can rely on. I want to be in their memories, not just their DNA. Olivia sighed and nodded. They asked about you all week. Even Elliot. They want to know where you live, what you do, why you weren't there before. I didn't know how to answer everything. I told them we had different lives, but that now you want to be part of theirs. That's true, Julian said, his voice steady. I want to earn my way into this chapter, not rewrite the last one. The kids came running back, Ivy insisting Julian had to see her flower crown, which was mostly grass and one daffodil. She placed it crookedly on his head and declared, Now you're King Julian. Elliot laughed, his first real laugh of the day, and Ryan snapped a picture with Olivia's phone. That photo would later become Julian's favorite. After they left the garden, they walked to the ice cream truck parked outside. Julian paid for all 3 cones and got himself one too, something he hadn't done since college. As they sat on the curb, sticky-fingered and covered in sprinkles, he realized something. This was real life. Not the polished boardrooms or private jets, but this, melted vanilla on jeans, Ivy's endless chatter, Ryan's clever remarks, Elliot's quiet glances. Later, as Olivia loaded the kids into the back seat of her SUV, Julian crouched to say goodbye. Ivy kissed his cheek. Elliot gave a small wave. Ryan looked up at him and said, Next Sunday, can we go to the Natural History Museum? Julian smiled wide. Absolutely. He looked up at Olivia, who gave the faintest smile before closing the door. As the car pulled away, Julian stood still, hands in his pockets, the spring breeze brushing past him. Something inside him had shifted. He didn't feel like an outsider anymore. He felt like someone who had just been given a second chance, and this time he wouldn't waste it. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. Julian paced the length of his loft apartment in Tribeca, glancing at the clock every few minutes. It was just past 6 p.m., but the unease in his chest had started hours earlier. Olivia hadn't answered his last text. Normally, she responded within an hour, especially when it involved the kids. But this time, nothing. He tried not to overthink it. Maybe she was just busy, maybe her phone had died, but the silence unsettled him. Over the last few weeks, their dynamic had shifted. The Sunday outings had become routine. Trips to the museum, afternoons in Central Park, even a rainy day movie marathon at Julian's place, complete with popcorn and bean bags. The kids laughed louder now. Elliot had started calling him Jay, his version of Dad, without fully realizing what it meant. And Olivia? She had started looking at him without armor in her eyes. They were building something fragile but real. Just as he was about to call again, his phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. Can you come to Mount Sinai Hospital? It's Elliot. He fell at school. Julian didn't wait to read it again. He grabbed his jacket and keys and bolted. The drive up to the Upper East Side felt like a blur. Traffic lights meant nothing, and every second felt like a weight pressing against his chest. He couldn't stop imagining the worst: broken bones, stitches, sirens. He hated hospitals. Always had. They reminded him of the week his father passed away when he was 17, and of the time Olivia had a miscarriage 2 years into their marriage. That cold, sterile smell. The waiting. The not knowing. When he burst into the ER waiting area, Olivia stood by the window, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her face was pale, makeup smudged from what looked like hastily wiped tears. She looked up, surprised but relieved. He's okay, she said before he could speak. It wasn't serious. Just a deep gash near his eyebrow. Lots of blood, but no concussion. Julian let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Can I see him? Olivia nodded and led him through a set of double doors to a small pediatric room. Elliot sat upright on a hospital bed, a white bandage taped across his forehead, clutching a stuffed sloth. Ryan and Ivy were perched at the foot of the bed, visibly calmer now. When Elliot saw Julian, his face lit up in a way that pierced straight through the haze of fear. Jay, he called, his voice surprisingly strong. Julian went to him, brushing his hand lightly through the boy's hair. Heard you had an adventure, buddy? Elliot nodded solemnly. I tripped over a backpack. Hit the edge of a bench. There was so much blood. Like, superhero battle blood. Julian smiled despite himself. Well, you look like a warrior. A nurse stepped in with discharge papers and a small container of ointment. Olivia took it, asking detailed questions about the stitches and how long until the scar healed. Julian watched her, the way she instinctively took charge, calming the kids with just a glance, hiding her panic under a calm exterior. He suddenly realized how much weight she carried alone. After they left the hospital, Julian offered to ride back with them, and Olivia didn't object. The ride was mostly quiet, the kids worn out from the day's drama. Julian sat in the back with Elliot, who eventually leaned against him and fell asleep. Olivia caught a glimpse of the moment in the rearview mirror. She didn't say anything, but something in her expression softened. When they pulled up to Olivia's brownstone in Park Slope, Julian helped carry Elliot inside while the other two ran ahead. Inside, the living room was dimly lit, toys scattered as usual, the faint smell of lavender and crayons in the air. Julian placed Elliot gently on the couch and covered him with a blanket. Olivia brought over a cup of tea for herself and offered Julian water. They sat across from each other, both drained. "You didn't have to come," she said after a pause. "But I'm glad you did." "Of course I had to come," he replied. "He's my son." Olivia nodded, taking a sip of tea. "You're getting good at this. The dad thing." He gave a small smile. "I'm trying. Still figuring out the bedtime song hierarchy." She laughed. "Ivy insists on singing her own version of Twinkle Twinkle now. Ryan corrects her grammar while she does it. And Elliot just wants to listen to rainforest sounds," Julian added. They both chuckled, and for a second, it felt like old times, like the years before everything fell apart. But the moment held something new too. A possibility. A bridge between who they were and who they might still become. Julian stood to leave, not wanting to overstay. But as he reached the door, Olivia called out, "Julian?" He turned. "Thank you for showing up. And not just today." He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "I'll always show up. I missed enough already." As he stepped into the night, the cool Brooklyn air cleared his head. He glanced back once, watching the lights in the window. A family lived in that house. A noisy, chaotic, beautiful family. His family. He hadn't expected to feel this deeply again. But life, it seemed, had a funny way of writing second drafts. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The sun had barely risen over the skyline of Brooklyn when Olivia stepped out onto the porch, her coffee steaming in the crisp morning air. Her eyes were tired, and her mind still reeling from the emotional whirlwind of the previous night. Elliot was fine, thank God, but the incident at the hospital had shaken her more than she was willing to admit. Watching Julian with the kids, seeing the genuine panic in his eyes when he saw Elliot, and the gentle way he had held him, had stirred something deep inside her. Not just old memories or long-buried feelings, but a kind of peace, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. She sipped her coffee slowly, listening to the faint sound of cartoons from the living room, and for the first time in years, didn't feel overwhelmed by the noise of her life. Julian, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. Back in his apartment in Tribeca, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone, resisting the urge to scroll through the hundreds of unread emails and missed business calls. His assistant had rescheduled 2 investor meetings and sent him a calendar invite for a charity brunch in Central Park, but none of it seemed urgent anymore. Not after last night. For the first time since his divorce, Julian wasn't thinking about acquisitions or board meetings. He was thinking about Elliot's bandaged head, Ivy's toothless smile, Ryan's sarcasm, and Olivia's tired but grateful eyes. He knew he had crossed a line, emotionally if not physically. And now he had no idea what to do with the weight of it. Later that day, Julian found himself pacing outside a bookstore in Park Slope. He had texted Olivia earlier asking if he could take the kids for the afternoon. She had hesitated, said they were tired, but eventually agreed. "Keep it low-key," she had written. So now, standing with 3 booster seats in the back of his SUV, Julian was scrambling for ideas. He didn't want to take them to a flashy restaurant or an over-the-top play place. He wanted something simple. Real. He finally settled on a small reading nook tucked in the back of the bookstore, a quiet place with story time, coloring books, and warm cookies. When the kids arrived, Olivia stepped out of the car with them, looking casual in a loose sweater and jeans. "They're still a little grumpy," she warned, handing Julian a backpack full of snacks and wipes. "You sure you're up for this?" "Absolutely," Julian said, taking the bag and crouching down to greet the kids. Ivy ran to him first, hugging his legs tightly. "We're going to the bookstore? Do they have unicorn books?" "Only the sparkliest," he grinned. Inside the bookstore, Julian watched the kids settle into a cozy rhythm. Ivy pulled a pink blanket off a chair and curled up with a book almost twice her size. Ryan wandered into the graphic novel section and sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping pages like a mini adult. Elliot, bandage still visible, sat beside Julian, watching a woman read aloud about a mischievous squirrel. Julian couldn't stop staring at him, not in fear anymore but in awe. How had he missed so much? How had he not known this part of his life could bring him more joy than any corporate deal? After story time, they sat in a corner cafe attached to the bookstore. Julian ordered hot chocolate and grilled cheese for the kids, coffee for himself. "Why did you and Mom break up?" Ryan asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the casual chatter. Julian blinked, caught off guard. Well, that's a big question," he said slowly, setting his cup down. "We were different people back then. I was very busy. And not very good at listening. Or showing up." Ryan chewed his sandwich thoughtfully. "Did you love her?" "I did," Julian answered quietly. "I think I still do, in a way. Maybe not the same way as before, but enough to care. Enough to want to be better." There was a pause, the kind only kids can make comfortable, and then Elliot reached out and held his hand. "We're glad you came back," he whispered. That night, Olivia got a video on her phone from Julian. The kids were sitting on a blanket in Central Park, the skyline glowing behind them, singing an off-key version of a lullaby. Julian's voice joined in, slightly out of sync, laughing halfway through. The video ended with Ivy yelling, "Good night, Mama. We love you." Olivia watched it twice before setting her phone down. She leaned back on the couch and looked at the photos on the mantle. Just her and the kids, framed smiles, frozen moments. For the first time in years, she considered the possibility of rearranging those frames. Of adding someone back in. Julian drove the kids home a little after 9. They were all half asleep in the back seat, slumped over each other like puppies. Olivia opened the door in her robe, barefoot, hair tied in a messy knot. She gave him a tired smile and helped unbuckle Elliot, who was snoring lightly. "Thanks," she said. "You didn't have to keep them out this long." "I didn't want the day to end," Julian replied, brushing a leaf from Ryan's sweater. "Neither did they." Olivia looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe next weekend we could all do something. Together. If you're free." "I'm always free for that," he said, his heart thudding faster than he liked. As he walked back to his car, Julian felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but purpose. The kind that didn't come with a paycheck or a press release. A quiet, steady kind. The kind that came with bedtime stories, spilled juice, and second chances. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The following Saturday dawned warmer than expected for mid-April in New York. Olivia had picked Prospect Park for their day out, a spot that used to be their favorite back when she and Julian were still together. It wasn't extravagant, but that was the point. The simplicity of a picnic with the kids under a canopy of trees, near the lake, with homemade sandwiches and store-bought lemonade felt more intimate than any fancy restaurant or gala could. Olivia had packed everything herself, including sunscreen, wipes, and the peanut butter cookies Julian used to love. She wasn't sure what made her include those, but it felt right. As she pulled into the parking lot, she saw Julian already there, spreading a blanket on the grass, the kids running toward him the moment they spotted his car. She took a deep breath, her chest tightening not from anxiety but something close to contentment, a feeling she hadn't felt in a very long time. Julian looked up and smiled when he saw her. There was no awkwardness this time, no second-guessing how to act. He walked up to her and took the cooler from her hands. "You didn't have to bring everything," he said. "But I'm glad you did." Olivia chuckled. Old habits. They settled on the grass, the kids already halfway through a game of tag, their laughter echoing across the park. It was one of those perfect spring days, sunny but not hot, breezy but not cold, and as the afternoon stretched on, time seemed to slow down. They talked about the kids' school, about the books Olivia had been reading, and even about Julian's company, though he kept that part brief. "It feels weird now," he said, watching Ivy do cartwheels. "All those boardroom wins feel small compared to this." They were quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable but familiar. Then Olivia looked at him and said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't divorced?" Julian looked at her, surprised but not caught off guard. "Every day," he admitted. "At first, I told myself we were better apart. That I was doing you a favor letting you go. But I was lying. I just didn't know how to be the man you needed." Olivia picked a blade of grass and twirled it between her fingers. "And now I'm learning. Slowly. But I'm learning." She gave him a soft smile. "You're doing better than I expected." As the sun began to dip behind the trees, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Julian pulled out a surprise. A small kite shaped like a dragon, something he had ordered a few days earlier. The kid's eyes lit up as he handed it to Ryan. "Let's see if we can make it fly." The wind was perfect, and within minutes the kite was soaring high, dancing against the sky. Julian helped Elliot hold the string, his arms wrapped around him protectively. Olivia took out her phone and captured the moment, a candid snapshot of joy and family and something unspoken that was slowly rebuilding itself between them. After packing up, they walked together back to their cars. Julian reached into his jacket and handed Olivia a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it later," he said, kissing the top of Ivy's head before helping her into her booster seat. Olivia watched him drive away, the kids waving through the back window, and then looked down at the envelope in her hand. She opened it when she got home. Inside was a folded piece of paper, an invitation to a parent-child dance at Elliot's school next month. On the back, Julian had written in careful script, "If you're okay with it, I'd like to go with all four of you. As a family." That night, Olivia sat at the kitchen table long after the kids had gone to bed. She read the note 3 times. Her heart was conflicted, not because she didn't want to say yes, but because saying yes meant tearing down the walls she had built so carefully over the years. It meant letting Julian in again with all the risk and uncertainty that came with it. But it also meant giving her children something they had always deserved, the wholeness of a family, even if imperfect. She picked up her phone, hesitated, then typed a message, "We'd love that. And yes, we'll go together." Julian read her message just as he was getting ready for bed. He stared at the screen for a full minute before smiling, a real smile, the kind that made his face ache. He didn't reply right away. He wanted to sit with that feeling a little longer. He had built empires, brokered million-dollar deals, stood on stages in front of thousands, but nothing compared to the quiet victory of that single text. It wasn't just about getting back with Olivia. It was about showing her and their children that he was no longer the man who walked away. He was the man who stayed, who showed up, who brought kites and cookies and awkward dance moves. The man who had learned, painfully and slowly, that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a series of choices. And he was finally choosing right. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends. The day of the parent-child dance finally arrived, and as Olivia prepared for it, she couldn't help but feel the familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach. It wasn't about the dance itself or what to wear. It was the question of whether or not she had made the right decision in agreeing to attend as a family. There was something symbolic about it, a step forward in rebuilding a connection she had closed off for so long. She had been cautious, carefully managing her emotions and protecting herself from the unpredictable nature of life and relationships. But Julian had made it clear with his actions in the last few weeks that he was different, and so, for the sake of their children, she agreed to give him this chance. She looked over at the kids, who were bouncing around with excitement as they prepared for the event. Ivy was already wearing a sparkly blue dress, twirling around as she watched herself in the mirror. Elliot was trying to tie his bow tie with an exaggerated effort that made Olivia smile. Ryan, the youngest, couldn't sit still for more than 5 seconds and was running between her and his siblings, showing off his excitement by asking when they could leave. Julian had promised to arrive early, and just as they were finishing up, he pulled into the driveway in his black SUV, the same smooth, confident stride he had always had when he stepped out of the car. This time, though, it was different. There was a warmth in his eyes as he looked at the children, their eager faces peeking out from the front door. He was already in his suit, a navy blue number with a classic tie, looking every bit the CEO he was, but somehow he had softened. His smile was genuine, and his presence had a comfort that Olivia couldn't deny. Julian greeted the kids with high fives, his hand lingering longer than usual on Ivy's head. She had always been his little princess, and despite the years that had passed, that bond was still as strong as ever. Ryan, still filled with endless energy, ran up to him, throwing his arms around his father's waist. "Ready, Dad?" he asked, his wide eyes full of anticipation. Julian grinned. "Ready as ever, buddy." Olivia, though not as enthusiastic as the kids, gave him a soft nod. "You look good," she said, her voice carrying a touch of warmth. "Thanks," Julian replied, his eyes scanning the scene before settling on her. "You look great too." The kids? They'd been counting down the days for this. Olivia smiled faintly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "I know." The ride to the school was filled with the typical back-and-forth chatter of kids, but even amid their noise, Olivia couldn't help but notice the ease with which Julian and she interacted. They hadn't been in this comfortable space for years. Their exchanges felt natural, like the awkwardness that had existed between them post-divorce was slowly dissolving, replaced by something more genuine. When they arrived at the school, the parking lot was already full, with parents and children spilling out of cars and heading toward the entrance. There was a buzz in the air, a sense of excitement that was contagious. As Olivia stepped out of the car with the kids, Julian came around to help Ivy out of her seat. Together, they made their way inside, where the gymnasium had been transformed into a sparkling venue for the evening. White twinkling lights hung from the ceiling, and a large banner reading Parent-Child Dance greeted them as they entered. The floor was alive with energy, with children running around, laughing and talking, while their parents either mingled by the snack tables or led their kids to the dance floor. It was a scene of warmth and joy, a celebration of family and connection. The moment they stepped into the gym, Olivia felt her nerves return. It wasn't the crowd that made her uneasy, but the intimate nature of the evening. A dance, in particular, felt symbolic. In many ways it was like a declaration, a reaffirmation of their family bond, and Olivia was still unsure whether she was ready to fully embrace that idea. Julian, noticing her hesitation, squeezed her hand gently. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Olivia nodded, though her mind was swirling. "Yeah, just a little overwhelmed, I guess." He gave her a reassuring smile. "We don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. We can just enjoy the night." They made their way to the table where other parents were signing in. As they approached, Olivia recognized some familiar faces, parents she had spoken to during parent-teacher meetings and other school events. She exchanged pleasantries with a few of them, but the whole time Julian's presence was a calming force beside her. It was clear that their children weren't the only ones excited about the event. It was a moment of community, a chance for everyone to see how their families were doing, and in a strange way, it also brought Olivia and Julian closer to the shared past they once had. The kids quickly darted toward the dance floor when the music began, eager to join the other children. Julian and Olivia followed, standing back and watching as their children jumped and spun around to the beat of the music. Ryan, as usual, had no rhythm but was full of energy, while Ivy and Elliot tried their best to keep up with the other kids. Julian, ever the sportsman, bent down and scooped Ivy into his arms, spinning her around until her giggles echoed through the room. Olivia smiled, her heart tugging at the sight of them together. There was something so innocent about the moment, so free of the baggage of the past. It was as if, for just a little while, they could be a family again, no questions asked. As the night wore on, Olivia and Julian shared a slow dance, their hands lightly brushing against each other's. The children had tired themselves out and they were sitting on the sidelines sipping punch and talking to friends. Julian, holding Olivia close, whispered, "This feels right, doesn't it?" She hesitated, her thoughts momentarily drifting to the past. "It does," she finally admitted, her voice soft. "I never thought we'd be here again." Julian's eyes softened, and he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I never thought I'd get this chance. But I'm not going to waste it. I want us to be a family again, Olivia. And I'm willing to prove it." His words lingered between them, and for a moment, Olivia allowed herself to believe him. They danced in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything they had been through hanging in the air, but for now, it didn't feel like a burden. For the first time in a long time, it felt like a new beginning. Before going to next, please subscribe our channel, like and share with friends.